Hello, everybody. It's a privilege to be invited to be part of World Localization Day. As we'll learn, those taking part on the discussion today have long been involved in projects that are dedicated to the renewal of ecological and social well-being. And I'll give you a quick introduction to those who are going to be involved in our discussion today. Julia Behrens is a medical herbalist based in Brighton, UK, whose work over several decades has focused on sustainable integrated healthcare that utilizes safe, reliable, non-toxic and locally sourced medicinal plants to help improve the body's natural ability to heal itself. And that, I think, is a theme that we're going to be hearing more about as the discussion evolves. We also have the privilege to have Terry Allan, an organic farmer and deep ecologist whose early experiences of growing up in the Appalachian Mountains drew her to horticulture. 18 years ago, Terry began the work of designing, digging and planting a medicinal herb garden in Bhopal, India, that has since become the center of healthcare work with toxic gas and water contaminated impacted communities. We also have Mr. Sarangi, who is managing trustee of the Sambhavna Clinic in Bhopal, which produces and prescribes a range of Ayurvedic medicines derived from the garden which Terry helped to create. Sathyu has been a relief worker and social activist in Bhopal since the earliest days of Union Carbide's 1984 gas disaster in the city. And I just wanted to first set out really the context of Sambhavna's work and the work of the medicinal garden. So the disaster, for those of you who are unfamiliar, began on the night of December the 2nd, 3rd, 1984, when a cloud of poison gas gushed without warning from a Union Carbide pesticides factory, engulfing the city of Bhopal in a deadly fog. People awoke from their sleep and opened their eyes into a darkness full of invisible fire. It was agony to breathe. Those who could ran for their lives, gulping down gas as they fled. There was no evacuation plan for local residents, so they didn't know which way to run or to take simple measures to help protect themselves. In the pain and confusion, families were torn apart, and the sun rose that morning to reveal scenes of an apocalypse. Residential streets were littered with corpses. At the main city hospital, which had 1,000 beds, tens of thousands of stricken people, coughing, struggling to breathe, sought medical relief. Amnesty International estimates that between 7,000 to 10,000 people died of their injuries in the first 3 days, but the agony was only just beginning. By the time the gas had dispersed, some 573,000 people had suffered exposure, leading to a range of chronic health impacts. And these include highly elevated rates of morbidity and mortality, which continue in the affected communities to this day, where well over 120,000 people remain chronically sick. There's a long-term prevalence of ocular and respiratory illnesses, such as early age cataracts, diminished vision, breathlessness, persistent cough, and chronic obstructive airways disease. The MIC, which was part of the gas cloud, also entered the bloodstream, causing multi-systemic injuries to organs within the body. Chromosomal aberrations have been discovered, increasing the likelihood of cancers and birth defects. Gynecological disorders such as uterine bleeding have been observed, along with high levels of reproductive disorders. Neurological and neuromuscular effects such as body aches, tingling in limbs, dizziness and loss of motor control are common symptoms of gas exposure. Immunological impacts have led to diseases such as tuberculosis manifesting at 3 times the national average. Anxiety, memory loss, and depression are regularly observed psychiatric effects. And evidence of second-generation or third-generation impacts is now firmly established. Some boys born to gas-affected parents suffer growth retardation, whereas hormonal chaos has afflicted girls. And if this weren't bad enough, another 100,000 local people live today in communities where wells and standpipes are contaminated by industrial chemicals leaking from toxic wastes dumped in and around the same accursed Union Carbide factory, which even now remains derelict and full of poisons. So the health disaster that followed the 1984 gas leak and the related environmental disaster continue because the perpetrators are yet to provide substantive remedies or be held to account. Civil, environmental, and criminal cases remain pending in courts against Union Carbide and its owner since 2001, Dow Chemical. Both companies do all that they can to avoid providing meaningful restitution. Bhopal has now seen 37 years of unimaginable suffering, an injustice that has never been righted, crimes that continue to go unpunished, and a community that most of the world have forgotten. In a world in which corporations design economic policies, ravage the environment, make or break governments, and operate with impunity, we are all potential or actual victims of corporate negligence and wrongdoing. Recent studies by UN agencies have found that tens of millions of toxic chemicals are being released into the global environment each year in ever-growing volumes. Chemicals that accumulate in animals and people and are linked with cancers and developmental disorders. Slow and silent Bhopals that are happening now in our communities, our workplaces, our bodies, and in those of our children. Over the 25 years of its existence, the Sambhavna Trust has focused on bringing local solutions to the horrific impacts of global corporatization. But along the way, it's also benefited greatly from international cooperation and skill sharing, as today's discussion will, I hope, demonstrate. To begin, Sathyu, I wonder if you could just say something about the context in Bhopal that was prevalent when the idea of the Sambhavna Trust and the sort of work it would carry out was conceived.
As Tim mentioned, I came to Bhopal immediately after the disaster. And as anyone can imagine, one of the super most important issues in the immediate aftermath was that of medical treatment. What do you do when people are groaning in pain? They are complaining of burning inside the body, inability to breathe, can't keep eyes open, eyes burning all the time, and a whole range of complaints. And what was most unfortunate was that there was no one knew what to do, because all the information about the leak gas was with Union Carbide, and Union Carbide took the position that all that information was a trade secret, and it continues to, till today, it continues to withhold that information. So in the absence of any information, doctors were treating people in thousands. They just did whatever they could, and it was basically symptomatic treatment. And so if you had burning in the stomach, you got a load of antacids. If your body was swelling up, you got diuretics. You're complaining of pain, you get painkillers. The unfortunate part was that this continued. Nothing changed. But in the immediate aftermath, while there were no infrastructures, no hospitals, not enough beds, not enough doctors, the survivors didn't give up. They fought. They fought for better healthcare, more hospitals, more beds. And it is because of the relentless battles, mostly on the streets in the first few years, that the government did invest a lot of money and set up a healthcare system with so many beds that the beds per 1,000 population in Bhopal was better than that in USA or Europe. But when me and a number of doctors and other people, we decided that, okay, let's see, we have the survivors organizations have won the battle for healthcare in Bhopal, but let us see how it is doing. And 10 years after the disaster, we did an evaluation of how the hospitals were doing, because what we had seen, what we had during our almost daily visits to the survivors' homes, was that despite taking a large amount of medicine, so many that they would not reply in numbers about the amount of medicines they have taken. They will talk of kilograms. Someone taken 10 kilograms medicine so far, or 30 or 40, and with no sustained relief to show for having taken so many medicines. We decided to do a study, and the results of the study were shocking to us, but later we found that this wasn't very, very different from what it is in most other situations. What we found was between 40 and 50% of the medicines that people were taking were either needless or potentially harmful to them. And that is when we found people have been taking painkillers and damaging their kidneys and liver for, they were being taking for 5, 7, 8 years constantly. Too many people taking steroids, antibiotics being taken indiscriminately, psychotropic drugs like anti-anxiolytics being taken just like everyday thing. So that is when we thought that we must do something. And what we realized was, with all these street battles and continuing agitation, you can get the government to set up a hospital care system. But we thought that we should be able to show how it is to be done through the power of demonstration. And that is how we began thinking of what kind of a clinic it would be that would be essentially focused on providing at least sustained relief in their complaints of breathlessness, of pain, body ache, joint pain, menstrual irregularities, and a whole other host of allergies. So that is when we thought that we started looking at what people were taking, and we found that they were taking too many. Their bodies were getting more loaded with more synthetic, potentially harmful chemicals. So it was like what we saw was like there was a circle of poison that there are people who have poison in their still poison or poisonous metabolites in their bloodstream, and then you give them more and more of synthetic chemicals. And we thought there should be a way out of this. And we found this way through our own traditional systems of Ayurveda, which is at least 2.5 to 3,000 years old, which predominantly uses herbs. And that is when we thought that we should try and integrate Ayurveda and yoga, which is drugless therapy. And so we started first with a little apprehension whether they will work, but we soon found within the first 2 years that Ayurveda and yoga both played a hugely important role in particularly providing sustained relief in many of the problems that had become by then, in the 12 years that it took for us to start the clinic, that had become chronic. And so we found that Ayurveda was, even for some of the problems, particularly for autoimmune disorders, for disorders related to the gastrointestinal system, for those with neurological systems, for the whole range of allergies, Ayurveda gave much better results than allopathic medicine. Of course, modern medicine has its place and continues to have its place, but we found that with the use of Ayurveda, it is possible to lessen the dependence, and particularly on painkillers. We weaned people out from people who have been using harmful painkillers for 8-10 years. We weaned them out just by using a medicinal oil that we prepared from a very common medicinal plant, actually seen as a weed. So what we found was that through drug-free therapies like yoga. There were problems of breathlessness, of menstrual pain, and also a lot of people had diabetes and hypertension, of anxiety and insomnia, and these could be treated through yoga, whereas Ayurveda could take care of a lot of people's problem with acidity, of inability, indigestion, loss of appetite. There are people who have just one chapati in the whole day, loss of appetite, and yet obesity. And Ayurveda was very much, very successfully was able to address these issues. And what we then found was that it was important that, because Ayurveda is known all over the world, but then in Ayurveda, a lot of medicines are used that just to increase their potency or possibly to get quick results. They use heavy metals, whereas we decided right from the beginning that we would just make it herbal. And there again, to ensure that we get the best quality of herbs, best quality of ingredients for the Ayurveda treatment. And also, I forgot to mention, but we use the Ayurveda detoxification procedures called Panchakarma. And that also uses a lot of raw plant medicine. For these reasons, we thought of starting off, along with our doctors treating people, we thought of starting an Ayurvedic herbal garden. And that's how we decided to start a garden.
Thank you, Sathyu. That was really, really interesting. And of course, it was at this point that Sambhavna had already been benefiting from input from international volunteers for a number of years, of which one was Terry. Terry had already visited Bhopal on a number of occasions before 2003, but it was in 2003 that you were assigned this really important project to get involved in designing Sambhavna's own medicinal herb garden. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about, well, your background first of all, but then your experience in working with local people to get this project off the ground.
Hi, I'm Terry Allan, and I've been an organic farmer for almost 40 years now, inspired in part by my first visit to Bhopal in 1987. Next slide. So I had just finished a 2-year assignment with the Peace Corps in Kenya, and I came to India to visit and happened to go through Bhopal, where just a couple years before the world's worst industrial disaster had occurred. And I found myself standing in front of the gate of the factory and surrounded by people, women and kids, who had all been affected by the gas. And I met many people that day, along with Sathyu, and I realized that we should not have to grow food in such a way that kills people so terribly. So I dedicated myself there to becoming an organic farmer so that I could learn how we could transform our food system to not require the use of poisons and not require poisoning the planet. And just the whole poisonous nature of all of it was repulsive to me. So since then, I've been working very hard to try to come up with alternatives and effective ways to live our lives without relying on poisons. Next. So the Sambhavna Clinic had originally started in a home in a neighborhood near the factory, and it was burgeoning with demand, with patients lining up outside, and they were quickly outgrowing the capacity of the original location. And they had found a site nearby in the shadow of the factory to build a new clinic. And that was a very exciting time to be visioning what we could imagine healthcare to be like and how it could be so much better than what we had all experienced so far in our lives with hospitals and modern medicine, the care of modern medicine. Next. So I arrived in Bhopal, and we took a very highly degraded piece of land that was covered with plastic garbage and waste from the sewage canal. Next. And we started cover cropping. One of the first things we did was make compost. We got seeds started, and before you know it, we had planted a garden. Next. So the second year, the garden looked like this, and behind the photographer, the construction of the new clinic building is going on. Next. This is what the garden looked like in 2016. It had matured from an open field where we had a few annual crops to a fully mature polyculture of perennial and annual plants with multi-stories and lots of biodiversity. In this picture, you can see that the plants on the ground have been allowed to seed themselves where they want to grow. They get to choose where they want to live and who they want to live next with. The plants are forming their own guilds and associations by the gardeners being able to just tend them as they lie and being sensitive to that. And this picture shows how the trees have grown up just in those 13 or so years that this picture was taken. So from nothing, we now have this forest of medicinal plants. Next. So the design challenge here was that we wanted every plant on the 1.5 acre campus to be of medicinal use to the practitioners and the community. So I was given a list of about 150 plants that the Ayurvedic doctors had already been prescribing. So they knew what plants they needed, and it was my mission to try and supply that to them. We didn't want to just have plants in rows. Could you please go back? We wanted also the plants to be beautiful, the landscape of the campus to be pleasant to be in and nice. When I had started designing this project and thinking about this project, there was lots of work already published on healing gardens. Many healthcare, even Western healthcare practitioners had discovered that being out in nature and having a natural place to sit and relax was helpful to the healing process. But when I started looking into the designs and the work that had been done, I found that other than having a peaceful meditative space to sit in, the healing gardens didn't actually include medicinal plants. So I took the challenge that not only should every plant be medicinal, it should be beautiful, and we would build a truly healing garden with the actual healing plants. And it would be just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than the standard healing garden that was on offer. So when we were working around the landscape of the building, we wanted to put the plants that were relevant to the particular department near where that department was, so that when patients were sitting and waiting for their visit with the doctor, they could see the plants that were potentially going to be part of their healing process and learn about them and observe them and build relationships with the plants. And also that the practitioners could have access to the plants when needed. So for instance, the roses in Nirgundi and Tulsi were planted outside the offices of the Panchakarma practitioners so that they could pluck the fresh herbs as needed for the steam baths. The Sita Ashok, which is a plant, a tree revered for its powerful effect on women's health, was planted outside the gynecology unit. Next. And so here's a before and after picture of, on the left, the Sita Ashok, a tiny little seedling, and 13 years later on the right, a fully grown tree completely shading the courtyard now. Next. The front entrance of the clinic planted with hibiscus, tulsi, and vines that have now grown to not only provide medicine, but to provide shade and comfort in the heat. So we like that our plantings and our designs are serving multiple functions at once. Next. And the whole thing is fueled by worms. So the fertility that's needed to grow all these plants is created on site itself through this very simple yet elegant worm composting system, which makes a fertilizer, a concentrated fertilizer, richer than compost, and is able to sustain a huge productivity off of this acre garden, just with materials gathered from the site. Next. And we have really, I believe, achieved our goal, and more than 100 medicinal plants are grown on the campus and used in making the medicines. Next. The materials are dried and processed and made into the Ayurvedic medicines by professionally trained Ayurvedic pharmacists and staff members. Next. The complicated Ayurvedic recipes are made on site with oversight from the pharmacist. Next. And the medicines are used in the treatment, in the Panchakarma, in the treatment. Here's the yoga room. Next. The plants are taken out into the community so that community members can learn about the plants and how to make the medicines that will help their ailments, so that we're empowering people in the communities to take charge of their own health care and try to use things at hand that they can grow themselves or find in an area to soothe their pains and problems. Next. And patients are, after they visit the doctor, are sent not to the pharmacy, but to the garden to collect their medicines. The prescription from the doctor is handed to the gardeners, And the gardeners help the patients collect their medicines to take home. Next. Wouldn't you feel better if this was your prescription? Next. The garden and the campus of the clinic also include spaces to enjoy being in nature and things to do while you're waiting. The children have a playground while they're waiting for their parents. There's a pond with turtles and nature environment around for people to watch and meditate and feel soothed by the sound of the water. There's shaded picnic areas for people to rest and have a cup of tea or a meal. Next. And these three amazing gardeners have really pulled it off for all these years. They are still there tending the plants. And every year they have learned something new and really innovated a lot of important techniques for making it possible, even in the tropics, to grow plants and medicine without using any chemicals at all. Next. So holding hands and working together, we can achieve local healthcare that is integrated, that works together with modern medicine to provide a comprehensive way of taking care of our health that allows the individual to have a greater engagement with their own health care. Next. This was the crew when we started the brand new clinic, and it's amazing to me that it's been 18 years now. And I'm so proud of everyone, and I think it's amazing what they've accomplished. And all of this was done, the garden had to be planted over and over again because India, like everywhere else, but perhaps more than some places, is already experiencing the effects of climate change, and 100-year floods are happening much more frequently. And Sambhavna's garden has been flooded multiple times. But now that the trees are basically established, they're resilient. They can withstand the floods. And the gardeners afterwards have to rebuild and keep going. If you advance 2 slides, I think you'll see a picture of flooding. So everything gets wiped out, but then it comes back after the flood and you start over and the plants take care of you. So I believe that it's absolutely totally possible to live a life without chemical poisons. And it just takes a group of people working together that cares about their own community to build these resources within your community. And I think we have seen the power of this community health system in action during the pandemic. And I would be very interested to hear how our neighbors in Bhopal are doing right now.
Thank you, Terry. It's really utterly inspirational what you've described and the work you've been involved in initiating, helping to cultivate and keep on track, and of course the amazing people that you've worked with who have been in it for the long game, as you say, sustaining what was originally created through all kinds of challenging contexts. It's very incredible. Sathyu, I wonder if you could just talk to us about where the garden is now, what its features are, the sort of work that it's been able to produce, and your experience, of course, with innovating methods to, as Terry says, avoid having to use any chemicals whatsoever when growing and cultivating the medicinal plants.
The Sambhavna Medicinal Garden that Terry designed and initiated is today one of the significant parts of our goal to create a model of a self-sustaining clinic specially designed for people who have diseases as a result of their toxic exposure to synthetic chemicals. The clinic's garden, which has almost 100 kinds of medicinal plants. Today, it supplies almost 60% of the ingredients that are required for the Ayurveda medicine manufacturing unit comes from the garden itself. These are both raw and processed herbs. The garden also supplies the ingredients for Ayurvedic detoxification procedures, which is particularly useful for chronic conditions called panchakarma. The garden also produces, gives the gardeners provide raw medicines plant medicines to a large number of people in a year, upwards of 2,000 in a year, for a range of health problems that are best addressed, such as piles, such as non-healing wounds. People who have been asked to have been directed by doctors to have their parts of their bodies amputated because of non-healing wounds have recovered and have not required amputation because of using of plant medicine. So there are at least 15 conditions in which medicinal plants in their raw state are much better than whatever else is available. So the garden does this, the gardeners do this. And another thing that the gardeners play an important role is in spreading the word of this garden in practical terms and taking the garden actually in the midst of the affected communities. Today we have 7 gardens, herbal gardens, in a population of about 40,000. And they are used, the people in these communities use them for most common complaints, up to 20 to 25 common complaints, ranging from diarrhea to things like menstrual pain or insomnia, and they do not have to visit the local doctors or spend any money for that. And the interesting part is people are, because of these small gardens in the community, people are themselves growing herbs in increasing numbers. Today we have almost 2,000 families in a total 40,000 population, which are growing medicinal herbs in their own homes. And the word is spreading. And the 5th thing that the herb garden does, the Sambhavna's herb garden does, is supply the solutions that we use to clean clothes or sweep or mop the floors or clean utensils that are used in the clinic. Because all of these are, we do not use any synthetic detergents, but use soap nuts, and the mosquito repellents all are produced from the plants grown in the garden itself. So the people use whatever is available to take care of the garden. Here, for instance, these are cardboard boxes in which medicines are supplied to the clinic, and these are being used to lessen the evaporation loss because of extreme heat. These are the gardeners who were trained initially by Terry. A fourth gardener has now joined them, and this is the place where the resting place for them, and also a place where they do quite much of the processing. This, as you can see, is the nursery come research unit. This is where saplings and seeds are generated and used. And here, Ratna, one of our gardeners, is giving plant medicines to one of the visitors to the clinic. We have small information boards that not only mention what the plants are good for, but it also mentions, because this is what we want to encourage and push for people to grow their own medicines. We believe that each plant grown is a statement against big pharma. And when more and more people start growing their own plants, a lot of the commonly used harmful medications would become, we don't have to use them. And some of the special features, as I mentioned, are that all the seeds and saplings are generated in the garden itself. They make whole different kinds of leaves and seeds are used to make pest control products. Terry has already mentioned vermicompost and green compost, and these have been being used exclusively in the garden itself. And then what we have started from 2017, thanks to a retired agroscientist, professor of agroscience from Brazil, who has done her PhD in growing medicinal plants. And she visited the clinic, and she suggested that we harvest soil microorganisms from forests that surround our city and use that to improve productivity and also control insects. And what we have found, we have done that. We have gone, and it's almost a no-cost process where we go and put some cooked rice cooked in non-chlorinated water in the soil, a few inches below the soil, and then we bring it back after 15 days, by which time microbes have formed their colonies on the rice, and then feed them with jaggery and make them grow. And in the last few years, what we have found that it has done a lot of good to our garden, and we are also promoting and trying to get more and more people to use it. The other thing that we have done, like as I said, we have a small area of land. The entire clinic is built in a 2-acre area, out of which about 1.25 acres is the garden area. So we are trying to produce as much as we can in the limited land area we have. The interesting part is that in this case, while the manufacture of modern medicine puts in a whole range of different kinds of chemical contaminants into the atmosphere, here, whatever the waste that is generated from manufacturing of Ayurvedic medicines is also composted and used in the garden itself. This is vermicompost that Terry had mentioned, that continues to play a critical role in improving soil productivity. These data show the kind of fertilizers that we have been producing in the last 3 years. As you see, the numbers have remained constant. The interesting part is, as you can see, in 2018 and 19, we produced of almost around 20 liters of different solutions to take care of the different insects. We get a lot of caterpillars, aphids, gessids, and for them, what we found that use of the spraying of the vanage, the microbe solution, when we do that, we do not require to produce these insects. And these are the liters of used in the garden, used by the sanitary wing. This is the microbe solution that we are calling vanage, that is born in the forest. And individual patients are using them for cleaning in their own homes, using in their toilets. And with what we have found that with the application of this locally harvested solution, this is the kind of research carried out by our gardeners when they show the impact of the spraying of vanage solution on the plants, as you can see. These are self-explanatory. Vanage has helped us use this particular plant, Plukia lanceolata, or rasna, a very important ingredient for one of the medicines for joint pains. We were not able to grow them in our garden for a long time, but once we have started using vanage, we now have enough of rasna, Plukia lanceolata, to provide for the entire supply for the medicines that we require in our clinic. So we are now offering the technology and also to use this to local organic farmers, because this is a very low cost solution. As we have shown, production can go even higher than 50% or 60%. As I said, many people have received sustaining relief from just using the raw plants, particularly for digestive system issues, for skin conditions. This is you can see that a lot of these are shatavari roots, asparagus roots that are used for medicines manufacturing, particularly for gynecological complications. And these are being processed right outside the medicine manufacturing unit. This is the production of nirgundi oil or Vitex negundo, not considered a weed. This plant gives us medicinal oil that people think is miraculous because it takes care of joint pains that immobilize people, and that had earlier required people to take painkillers. But this oil has now helped people to get away from. This is Lalita ji. She is one of the medicine manufacturers. We have 4 of them working. She's grinding some of the ingredients. This is again part of the grinding processing. This is the final product made. These are tablets. These in the tablet making process, and finally these are both modern medicines and Ayurveda medicines are given free of cost to the people visiting the clinic. And this is the clinic's dispensary where the medicine produced in the medicine manufacturing is brought and stocked. This is the production of nirgundi oil. All of this is part of the production process. These are panchakarma procedures for which this is a particularly very effective procedure for insomnia, and it is called Shirodhara. A medicinal stream is put on the forehead, and the person is asked to relax. For these panchakarma procedures, the plant medicines are used. gardeners. This is another process of massage in Panchakarma that uses medicinal steam. Steam is boiled, water is boiled along with medicinal plants, and they are used. We face the challenges, like as I said, we require more area to produce all the medicines that we need. And one of the ways that we are thinking of taking care of coping with the limited space is to grow more crops and grow and maybe possibly try vertical gardening. We have the problem of we are about 500 meters south of the factory that leaked the poisonous gases that killed our city. And the waste from the factory is contaminating the groundwater as we speak, including the groundwater below our plant. So that is another challenge for us. And Terry already mentioned the problem of flooding and how we have so far successfully coped with it. Even now, as we speak, we have a storm for the last 3 days. We have at least 4 trees that have fallen, thankfully not causing much damage, except one of our solar batteries is crushed. But we know that we have to continue to innovate, continue to think and think differently, and do our best as we can with the clinic that is become now a very much a significant part of the work of the clinic, and it's expanding. The best part is people are continuing to find new things to do, and as I mentioned, what Dr. Vera from Brazil has contributed immensely in bringing a qualitative difference in the clinic that was designed and initiated by Terry. We now want to have a paving or a path through all around the garden, because we find that one of the things that the toxic exposure has done is made more people obese and more people with diabetes and hypertension. And we know that walking is something that there is this first hesitation, and then once you get to it, you don't want to stop. And that is the reason we want to have this path built around to get people to walk and also to enjoy the garden more. We are trying to cope with more summers getting hotter and water getting scarcer. We are trying to figure ways of using brown water coming from the clinic. And like I said, we also want to experiment with see if we can make use of the space all around the garden walls for growing some of the medicinal plants that we need to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Sathyu. Thank you. One of the things, I mean, there are so many extraordinary elements to what you've just presented, but one of the things that jumps out is that you have people from different parts of the world who are drawing on experiences based on local sustainable practices, and that bringing that knowledge together and helping innovate and transform environments elsewhere in the world with using local knowledge of sustainable practice. And of course, Terry has been a massive part of that too. And I think, Julia, in speaking with you in recent days, again, one of the things that struck me was this, the sheer amount of parallels in terms of your philosophy and your approach and your thinking with what has been achieved in Bhopal, with the way in which Terry has approached her work over the decades as well. And I wonder if you could say something about how you got into this work, what drove you to become interested in it in the first place, and also your experiences of trying to do similar things in quite substantial ways to what's been done at Sambhavna, because as I understand it, you've been involved in trying to bring knowledge of medicinal plants to communities where, well, traditionally there is an absence of understanding. And you've also been involved, I think, in a seed scheme which attempts to encourage people, individuals, to propagate their own medicinal plants and use them in the community.
I'm absolutely blown away by what you guys have done in India. It's just incredible to see in 18 years that you've created this amazing environment for people to heal and get well, to grow their own plants. This idea of, you know, when you're ill, you get sent to your gardener, and the gardener helps you choose your medicine. The one that's actually the lovely images of what, you know, pharmaceuticals also alongside herbal medicine being given to people, and this form of preventative medicine, this form of helping people who didn't know how to help themselves. You amazing examples of how people who were told they were going to have amputations, yet by the support of the doctors and the people out there, you managed to help people not have limbs amputated. I mean, this is amazing stuff that you're doing out there, and it's incredible. And I am completely honoured to be even involved in this conversation, really, because I suppose in England, in India, you've got this cultural tradition of Ayurvedic medicine and yoga and exercise, mind, body, and spirit. And we used to have a cultural history of using herbal medicines, but, you know, that's kind of, we're seen as not as important. In the industrialization, it was seen as quackery. It wasn't seen as not the main ingredients for pharmaceuticals like opium and painkillers, like digitalis, foxglove. You know, a lot of these medicinal plants were the raw materials of pharmaceuticals. And I love the way that you talk about, you know, stopping the circle of poisoning and looking at your environment and how the environment and connecting with the people, they become part of their environment. They appreciate their environment. And you've done it in such a beautiful way, having a playground where the parents can wait or pick up their children, where they can get healed. And you've kind of thought of every angle and grown plants from the top of the archway as you enter the building. You know, you really are making use of the whole building. So I'm completely inspired by what you have done, completely inspired. And yeah, I got into herbal medicine about 25 years ago when I went traveling around the world, and I went to India and I saw people, yeah, they might have, you know, been given antibiotics, but in this other hand, they had prebiotics to support their gut health, knowing that the damage that was done by the antibiotics. With this other hand, you were given to children, to adults, you were given prebiotics to reintroduce the healthy gut bacteria back into the gut. And that association between the gut flora, the mind, body, and spirit, there's loads of research at the moment about 70% of your immune system's in your gut, how important the gut microbes are, but also the soil. You know, Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. The quality of the soil and the fact that you've got this rich soil and you're producing 60% of your medicine, that's a really sustainable solution to the future crisis that the pandemic's causing, and the future crisis that the world's having. You know, we're running out of antibiotics, and we need to look at alternative ways that have been used for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And this isn't new medicine, it's just we're having to reintroduce people back to nature, back to their roots, getting into the soil, connecting with the earth. And it's not only the medicinal qualities, it's there was a King's Fund report in 2016 that really highlighted the benefits just being outside in nature. Terry, as you mentioned, being outside in nature and, you know, helping with your mental health, your physical health, the teaching, the education. It really feels like you've got this, you know, you've got this really sorted under all adversities with the floodings, the trees coming down. And I'll show you a little, very quick slideshow of what we've been doing, or I've been doing with colleagues in the UK. I won't be a second. So yeah, I'm Julia Behrens. I've actually been, I'm working for, I'm very into education and encouraging people to take their health into their own hands, to the point where I have written stories for children, encouraged children to learn about medicinal plants. Because for a lot of people, plants just look green. They have no idea of the medicinal properties. So engaging them in stories and the culture and the folklore really helps people sort of connect with the plants. So I do a lot of workshops with children, and I do a lot of workshops with the Green Cuisine Trust, which is a wonderful organisation that run by Daphne Lambert. And we do a lot of educational projects supporting women to take their health into their own hands. And we look a lot about fermenting foods, how to prepare foods, so that you can have it not just when the plants are in harvest, you understand how to dry them and use them in the future. So pickling, fermenting, that kind of thing. So I set up this herb garden with a group of volunteers at the Hurst-on-Sea surgery, which is a complementary or an integrated surgery, a GP surgery that has an eco building. I introduced the idea to celebrate 100 years of women getting the right to vote. I thought not only to empower women to get the right to vote and looking at their financial health, I also wanted to celebrate them by creating a medicine chest for them in the shape of a woman, to honour women and the women that have gone before us. And so I designed this, and a carpenter helped build this together for us. And within the layers of her dress, she had soil put in. We've got loads of people helping us there. And then we planted medicinal plants within her dress. So she would have like chamomile in her arms, and chamomile is traditionally used for eczema. She'd have thyme around her chest because it's used for respiratory tract infections. We'd have sage around her throat, for sage is traditionally used for hot flushes and sore throats. Maybe peony in the pelvic area. And in the skirt, there would be other herbs laced on. You can see the surgery back there, actually. It's also got a green roof and solar panels. That's me teaching. And we have things like milk thistle, again, to support with detoxification, especially when we're not detoxifying, as there's a lot of poisons and people are becoming more allergic and sensitive to certain toxins. Milk thistle is a great herb. We use the seed, crush the seeds to help with liver, supporting liver detoxifications. We've got loads of milk thistle in there. And there's our team. I think it was quite interesting what Terry said. It, you know, and Sathyu, you know, they were so lucky to have such a big community to help and support them, to fundraise, to get the money and the people, and the, you know, you really need to get people on board. And it's you know, I don't want to quote Terry, but I will. She said taking a group of people working together, and I think that's kind of really crucial. You have to get everyone on board to make this work, and once you get it going. And here's the team here. Once you get the plants growing, it just takes over, and the plants do their thing, and they keep growing and growing. So what we got a couple of people to grow seeds, and we would distribute in the GP surgery. So when patients went to their doctors, there'd be a whole tray of seeds there in little pots for people to take away and grow for their own medicine, to learn about them, or to bring them back to the medicinal garden. And that inspired a fellow doctor who I introduced to the clinic, called Sarah Anderson. It inspired her, and she's up there on the left, to not only help me in the garden, planting all the seeds and the marigolds. Again, the marigolds are really antifungal and could be used as a douche or as a tincture and infusion, whereas a lot of some antifungals, orthodox antifungals, wouldn't be effective. This is a lovely marigold that you can grow yourself. Nasturtiums also inspired us to set up a seed project where we distributed 2,500 seed packets to over 50 GP surgeries all over Sussex, We decorated a box, we had the seeds put into a little seed packet with a beautiful envelope and a card. And we went round to about 50 GP surgeries, delivering these boxes of seeds for them to encourage their patients to start growing themselves. Because in England, there's very much a culture, you know, if you go ill, if you're ill, you go to your doctor. And this was a kind of helping people to think about taking their health into their own hand rather than handing your health over to your doctor, kind of reclaiming that a little bit and taking your health into your own hand. And the seeds also symbolize kind of seeds for the future, seeds of intention. What are you growing? How are you growing your health? What are you doing to nurture yourself? And for some people, the feedback we got was amazing. You know, some people have said, you know, I've been too scared to go outside. I'm so scared. I got ill when I went outside, but coming outside, planting these seeds, I feel so much better being out in nature. I've joined a gardening group. I'm working with a community garden. Just sitting outside makes me feel better. And so we've had some really, really lovely feedback. And not only are we having feedback from the patients, the staff have loved growing all these plants as well. And not only do they smell good, but they, you know, they taste good. They can add them into salads. And I think it's very much about education. It's how do you encourage people to start growing if they've never grown before, or how do you encourage them to make things into medicine if they don't know what to do? So we had these fact sheets on the GP's website of what the marigold does, how to make a tea and infusion for it, what the chives do. Again, they belong to the garlic family, so again, great prebiotic for your gut health. And then we've had through the nasturtiums, again, beautiful salad plant that you can add to your food, but also is, you know, nature's natural antibiotic. So if you're slowly including little things from the garden into your diet, you can really improve not only your general well-being as a medicinal, but also connecting with nature and your environment. The vitamin D from the sun alone is really helping improve your healing journey. So this is what's going on at the moment. And I set up a herb garden before this in 2000, which is wild in a local park. And again, people encourage not only the wildlife into the area, so enrich the land, but it also, people come and grow, harvest little things on their own, and it takes care of itself. I hardly go there anymore, but when I do, the plants are still growing, the people are still asking questions, and people are picking and making their own medicine without the supervision, because they question what the plants are there for. And yeah, this is some of the work I do with Daphne Lambert with Green Cuisine Trust, and we educate and help people take their health into their own hands by identifying plants, foraging from the wild, and finding simple ways of turning it into a medicine, so that people can help themselves and empower themselves, rather than hand over their health without question, and improve the gut flora, gut-brain connection, and feel better. So thank you. That was the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Julia. I think it strikes me that at the root of the projects we've heard about today is this idea of reducing reliance on pesticidal poisons, on harmful pharmaceuticals, because too often the more harmful kinds of modern medicinal chemicals and pharmaceuticals are not about providing solutions, providing markets for the manufacturers. And I think what happened in Bhopal was that after a pesticide plant went haywire and poisoned an entire population of a city, pharmaceutical companies gradually moved in the aftermath, and were part of that irrational, potentially harmful, symptomatic treatment program that persisted for years and years afterwards without any real solutions being brought to the situation, until Sambhavna began establishing a different model, an alternative healthcare model in the city. I think it would be great if we could all unmute and just open up now to to a quick discussion to share some of these insights and really round up we hope will be a useful overview and set of insights for people joining this event and viewing it as part of World Localization Day. Among a number of the significant statistics that you mentioned, Sathyu, you talked about having been able to encourage 7 different gardens to be put together in gas and water affected communities. And one thing you said was that 80% of everyday medical problems are being taken care of from those gardens. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that, because that seems incredibly significant if as a percentage of dependency.
Yeah. What, as I said, that we have, what we are doing is our community health workers who work with about 100 community health volunteers, members from the same community who work without expecting any payment. These are people who are also mostly women who manage their households, who know that up to 30% of the income goes into paying for medical treatment. So they are the ones who are most keen in trying and creating these herbal gardens. And it essentially doesn't mean a lot. It means just finding a place that can be used. Sometimes we have used places that are used to dump garbage, and just find another place to dump garbage and use that small plot of land to grow just a dozen plants. These are plants of aloe vera, of Adatoda vasaka, of giloy, tulasi, which is very common, asparagus, and rose, and neem, and lemongrass. And these take care of problems like headaches, like diarrhea, vomiting, stomach aches, cold, cough, menstrual pain, sleeplessness. So almost about what we've seen, about 20 common complaints are addressed. And these are what, and when people first, not all of them, it is true, like Julia said, that because we have many people in the community themselves who know from their grandmothers that these plants work, but it is only after they see their effect themselves that it grows popular, and then they one suggests to the other in the family or their neighbors, and that's how it grows. So we think that, and because one of the problems that exists here is not just with the bad health, it is with the bad health care. Because most often when they would have these common complaints, they would get an antibiotic, say for something that which even modern medicine won't agree, something that is viral, or they would be treated with antibiotics. So what these plant medicines do is not only provide them relief from their problem, it also protects them from these hazardous medication, which is often the rule.
Right. And Julia, in terms of the plants that you've been working with in a similar way, because you've been attempting to encourage local uptake, and as you say, sort of decreasing dependency on pharmaceuticals and increasing agency of people in terms of participating in their own healthcare. Notice nasturtiums, they're clearly not a non-native species to the UK, one of the plants you've been using, but it seemed like the others were largely native species. I just wonder, do you find that the local medicinal plant, the native species plant, is it limiting in terms of the amount of conditions that you can reach and help? So have you looked outside of native species for your work, or is there a sufficient sort of pharmacy, as it were, of local plants for what you do?
Yeah, there are local plants that you can use. The old herbalist would feel that what you grew, what you needed, grew around you. And right now, I've got ginkgos and lemon balms and nettles, great for arthritis. But you know, I think also there comes a point where you need to pulse and try different things. Not one size fits all. Not one plant will suit everyone. And the wonderful thing about traveling and the sharing of seeds, the sharing of medicine, the sharing of knowledge is that we can use different herbs. We can grow turmeric here, but you know, the knowledge is from India, you know, and as an anti-inflammatory, devil's claw, hypophytum is from Africa. So a lot of these anti-inflammatory plants are fantastic. And so we can use them and adapt to them depending on what the individual client needs. And I think that this is the key. It's the individual person. It's not this general painkiller. It's like, well, what kind of pain is it? Is it from tension? Then we need massage. Then it, you know, then and looking at is it, for example, women going through the menopause, 40% of them get put on antidepressants. The menopause is a natural cycle that women go through. Is it a cultural understanding of what's happening for that woman? Is it a cultural support? Is it, or we could just, you know, give HRT or you know, this kind of looking at the options of what does that individual need? Does she need support at home? Does she need support with the childcare? Does she need a break? Does she need to do some yoga? And looking at lots of different options rather than this idea of this magic bullet curing everything. And that's the problem, is the idea of this one magic bullet, where actually you have to take the whole person into account, and that includes their environment. That includes having access to plants, so having access to the knowledge and good water, good air, and good food from good quality soil, and that's the challenge, really.
Thank you. I think long before climate change became an undeniable reality and environmental destruction was probably more widely accepted, Terry, you got involved, I understand, in deep ecological practices, and I think you spent time in South America doing that sort of work. And I wonder if you could say a bit more about that and those experiences and how that fed into what you did in Bhopal also.
Well, I would say that in general, humans have separated themselves from our environment, and that this could be the beginning of the problem. We are not apart from our environment, we are a part of it. And so how do we work, how do we use our fine skills of observation and our sharp intelligence to observe the nature, the animals, the things that we eat, the effects that it has on our bodies, to tune in, to have a more healthy and vibrant relationship in our environment with our community's place in the environment. I wanted the previous discussion brought up for me. I think, like, why do we think that Sambhavna is a model? Because people have been practicing herbs and herbal medicine for thousands of years. And I believe that it's because our modern world and the dominance of modern medicine practices throughout the world have squashed our memory of our more integrated lifestyle. And what Sambhavna does, I have not been able to recreate the pairing of modern medicine with Ayurveda and getting the practitioners to actually talk to each other and respect to each other and figure out which protocol would be the least harmful and the most successful protocol. And one of the things that I was so impressed by with Sambhavna is that the doctors, the modern medicine doctors and the Ayurvedic doctors would meet and talk to each other about their most difficult cases that they could not solve with their techniques. And together they would work on it to try and come up with a solution. And this working together side by side to combine the herbal medicines with the effectiveness of some of the modern medicines, because sometimes herbs are not the only solution, but how can these systems support each other most effectively? And Sambhavna has done the work, they've collected the data, the recommendations that they are putting out are evidence-based, and we can build upon that, I think, to build medical care systems that aren't bankrupting every family just to take care of their health, that aren't bankrupting our countries trying to cover healthcare. And here in the US, we are faced with a giant obstacle. The American Medical Association, the doctors that I talk to will not risk their license by participating in a practice with an herbal practitioner or an Ayurvedic or a yoga alternative practitioners. Here in America, the alternative practitioners have to operate separately and independently. And you as the patient have to figure out, okay, I'm gonna put together these elements to heal myself. Instead of having professionals with evidence and experience say, we have found that this pathway works. First, maybe you start off with the herbs. If that doesn't work, maybe then you have to take an allopathic medicine for a short time. What is the least harmful pathway and protocols that we can come up? And I think that this community-based health model like Sambhavna would be perfect for primary care as well as for more complicated chronic ailments. I don't think that the modern medicine has a lot to offer us for chronic ailments. And then I think there's the occasional, impossible to cure case that if we put great minds to it and work together, we can come up with protocols and ways to use modern science to help guide our ancient knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, that was almost a perfect rounding up, I think, of what we've.
Can I just add a little bit more? Because Terry brought me to this integrating modern science with traditional knowledge. I think this respect of the modern medicine physicians for the Ayurveda physicians or the yoga therapists or the Panchakarma procedures, all this could happen because we have a pretty advanced medical information system that we have designed ourselves. The software has been designed by us. So what we found through these years, we have actual data of which people with what complications responded best. So there is very little grounds for doctors to actually have differences of opinion, or if they do have those differences, they can be sorted out just by looking at the data, analyzing the data. The other thing is that is special about Sambhavna's Ayurveda and the use of the plant medicines is since the evolution of Ayurveda some 3,000 years back, a lot has been done by modern science into knowing the phytomedicines and analyzing the plants medicines. And to give an example, I mean, we had for the last 2 years, we are having an ongoing epidemic of fungal infections, essentially ringworms, which is an extremely irritating problem. It doesn't go easily. And as it happened, because the Bhopal population is a compromised immunity people with compromised immunity, So this has soon reached epidemic proportions and is still ongoing, unfortunately. But what was happening was the doctors who were treating them were using the most potent antifungals they had. And as a result of that, within just 2 months, all the patients were coming with fungal infections were resistant to itraconazole and ketoconazole and whatever antifungals were commonly available. And that is when we found that we had to go to the lab, and we started looking for all the antifungal plants we had. And of course, we had some cactus that was euphorbia, which we started using. So because we have a lab, that microbiology lab, we were able to get these plant extracts from euphorbia, from kadamba, 3 kinds of antifungals from our own medicinal garden. And we were able to test it in our microbiology lab. And we found that they were in fact doing much better than the most potent modern antifungal that was there. And now almost everyone who comes here with ringworm infection in our clinic, irrespective of where they have been treated earlier or with what, we are finding a very, very good response.
Unless anyone would like to add any further thoughts, I think I'll round up the discussion now. And I just wanted to say that the Bhopal Medical Appeal has hosted this event. You can find out more about Sambhavna's work over the years on our website, www.bhopal.org. And yeah, thank you for listening. And please do follow up with questions that you have, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that as they arise. Yeah, and if you've been inspired by what you've heard, do follow up, and we'll keep you in the loop. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing all of these incredible things that you've been involved in.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
Thank you, Terry.